Reagan, and today I'm back with a very special video. I would say we are officially just a little bit past halfway through the year. So because of that, I've decided to kind of look at everything I've read so far and discuss my top 5 favorite books of the year so far. I personally love to make these videos because I think it's interesting to see at the end of the year, like which half of the year had my strongest reads. Last year, I read a lot of books in the last 2 months that ended up making my list, but this year, I don't know if that's gonna be the case because I feel like I've had a super strong showing by lots of books in the very early parts of the year, so I don't know, it'll be interesting. But without further ado, let's chat about my favorite books of the year so far. So the first book I'm gonna talk about is honestly the holy grail of 2019. I do not know if there's going to be any book that's going to be able to top this series for me this year, but we'll see. And that is the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin, and honestly the entire Broken Earth trilogy. I marathoned books 1 and 3 back to back, blew my mind, blew my heart into a million pieces. If I literally encounter a stranger on the street and they find out I like books and they're like, what should I read? I'm like, the 5th season. It's so good. It's like my mantra. I'm like, have you read it? Have you read it? This is a deeply personal and unique fantasy trilogy set in a world where the Earth is constantly faced with catastrophe. The Earth and the tectonic plates, very, very active. Constantly humanity is faced with world-ending, civilization-ending earthquakes, which obviously results in like volcanic eruptions and all sorts of things like tsunamis and clouds blocking out the sun, bringing on a new ice age. Civilization ends over and over and over again. Therefore, humanity to survive have created communities that run on very specific sets of rules, and everyone kind of follows something called the stone lore, which is like passed on through civilization to civilization. Another part of this world is there are people who can actually harness the Earth's power in kind of a magical capacity, and instead of being like celebrated as possible protectors from the Earth's anger, they're actually looked on with suspicion, and they're rigidly controlled by society at large. In this story, we follow multiple perspectives of people kind of surviving and trying to make their way throughout this world. There's a huge journey element within this book. There's lots of movement that occurs, and it's just one of the most uniquely written novels, and the author's use of perspectives. There's also just so many topics that are touched on in this novel, from motherhood to sexuality to race and identity and all of those things, and you just follow people through life trying to survive in the most harrowing of circumstances. That combined with one of the most unique magic systems and fantastical settings I've ever encountered, and a incredibly compelling mystery at its core. I mean, it has everything you want. Complex characters, fantasy, magic, mystery. Everything you want. Everything you want. It's one of the best things I have ever read. Love this book. We'll never stop talking about this book. Another favorite of the year so far is The Missing of Claire de Lune. I have been obsessed with the Mirror Visitor series. The first 2 novels were incredible. The sequel I loved even more than the first one, if I'm being fully honest. But again, another truly unique YA fantasy story, and I really think that, similar to the 5th season, they're nothing like each other, but I just feel like this world setting and characters is something that I've just never encountered in YA, and just that freshness of this story and narrative has just made me fall in love with it so much. This is a story where we follow our main character, Ophelia, and she has an interesting set of power. She can basically touch objects, see their past, and all the people who have maybe owned that object, and 2, she can travel through mirrors. She lives in a fantasy world where there are communities that literally exist in spires in the sky. There was some sort of catastrophic event that broke the world up where she is into these type of like floating spires. Each spire has a family spirit that kind of lords over everything, very much inspired by multitudes of different religions from like our world. And her family spirit is Artemis. At the beginning of the first book, she's sent off to a different spire to be married off. This is a very different place. New spire is very cold, and the politics in this spire are cutthroat, and the magic is just as cutthroat. very different. And we see Ophelia kind of try to struggle to literally survive, but also like make her place in this new strange land. Ophelia as a main character as well is just so different as a heroine. She's very quiet and very reserved, but that does not make her weak. And kind of seeing her character arc and come into herself, I think is just one of my favorite things about this story. I'd also say the romance is so unlike anything you would ever encounter in YA, and it might be why some people don't love this book as much as I do, but I honestly think it's refreshing and just awkward and cute, so that's where I stand on that. But I just love this story so much. It's poetic, it's beautiful. I want the third book now. Huge fan of this series. And also look at the covers, they're incredible. I also kind of like how we're coordinating right now. Yellow, red, white. It's great. Next book I'm going to talk about is The Winter of the Witch by Catherine Arden. This is the third and final book to the Bear and the Nightingale series, which I love from beginning to end. This particular trilogy is just something that was built for me to love it. It is a magical historical fiction novel set in medieval Russia. Throughout this trilogy, we follow our main character Vasya from a young girl to a young adult. We literally watch her grow up right before our eyes. In the first one, she basically encounters the magical folklore within her land, and she can kind of harness its power. And in the first story, her father gets remarried, and this new woman is a very devout religious woman, and she kind of vows to rid the town of their devotion to some of these folklore characters. And we see Vasya kind of have to like try to prevent darkness from taking everything away. And in the first one, she kind of encounters and comes into her magic, and through the rest of the series, she kind of has to like accept her magic and use it to try to save Russia. There's lots of traveling. It's so amazing. Vasya as a main character, I'm obsessed with. She is powerful, sure of herself. I also really love how the author explores Vasya within this more traditional setting. We are still in like 14th, 15th century Europe. There are certain expectations put on women, and a lot of them are not trapezing across the countryside, dressed as a boy, using magic. So she really explores the complicated family dynamic. She's close with her siblings, but her siblings also have a hard time accepting who she is. That combined with a rich political, historical, like moments in this as well, taking from real history and then adding magical elements to it. I love this series so much. It combines so many cool elements of Russian folklore, magic, winter, storytelling, family. It's awesome. And this third book was an amazing concluding novel. It's beautiful. I love it. Next book I'm going to talk about is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is a very beloved book by the internet, and I was very late to reading this, but I'm really glad I did because I loved every second of it. This is a story that basically follows a aging starlet. She's like super famous, recounting her whole life to a biographer. This is a narrative that's kind of structured where we kind of jump between past and present, where we both follow the writer of the biographer and kind of her relationship with Evelyn Hugo, but we also jump back in time to the tale that Evelyn Hugo is kind of weaving for her eventual biography. This is such a touching story full of so many relatable and dynamic characters. I always describe Evelyn Hugo as someone that feels so real to me. As I was reading this, I wanted to watch her movies. I like had this sense of wanting to Google red carpet looks that are referenced in this book, and like moments in time. Evelyn as a character just felt so tangible and intangible because she's also this beautiful icon and glamorous figure within old Hollywood. Other elements of this story is that it's kind of structured around her seven husbands. They're kind of huge chapters in her life. And I also just love how the novel kind of dives into the glamour of old Hollywood and also all of the grime that's honestly probably still very much present today. A lot of these characters also identify as either bisexual or gay, and how that plays into their lives, both in their careers but also their personal lives as well. And honestly, it's just heartbreaking to see the hoops that people have to jump through to just be happy. It's a really amazing story, absolutely addicting from page one, a huge page turner, I would say for sure, and just wonderfully written. I loved every second of it. It's so good. And the last books I'm going to talk about is the Keeper of the Lost City series by Shannon Messenger. I've probably read like more critically acclaimed books this year, but I have to say one of the series that have just brought me the most joy has been the Keeper series. I think I've read books 2 through 6 this year, so I've read so many of them, and I have just fallen so in love with this world, all the characters, the narrative. I'm obsessed with them, and I just want to protect them for the rest of my life. And just the amount of joy this series has brought me, I feel like I have to give it a nod and mention it into my top 5. This is an incredible middle grade series where we follow our main character Sophie, who in the first one discovers that she's an elf, has magical powers. She's transported to a magical land where she makes a bunch of new friends, goes on lots of adventures that you encounter through all of these books. There's even more books. 2 more books not mentioned in this box set. They're great. They're long. They read so quickly. If you want something that's just full of friendship and love and adventure, you have to pick up this series. I honestly don't know why more people don't read and talk about this book series, because it's creative and clever too, and I love it all, okay? I love it. Hey guys, those are the top 5 books I've read so far this year. Please let me know down below some books that you've read so far this year that you've loved, as I would love to know, and I just got my library card, so I'm looking for some ebook download recommendations. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you soon with another video soon. Goodbye!